Have you ever watched a video and you see someone do something and it hits your mind that, hey, I can actually try something like that, and I would be curious to see the results that come out of it. So that's what exactly happened, and in particular, I was watching Kai's videos, these specific episodes on his other channel, Kai's Mind, where he was taking time to read so that he could better his grammar or something like that, so he could better articulate his way of communication. So I also got inspired and want to try out reading for 7 days, and in particularly I'll be reading Be Careful What You Wish For by Jeffrey Archer, and I think I'll give myself 30 minutes of reading. It is 2:03 in the morning, and yeah. Be careful what you wish for. Harry Clifton was spoken by the sound of a phone ringing. He was in the middle of a dream, but couldn't remember what it was about. Perhaps the instant metallic sound was just a part of his dream. He reluctantly turned over and blinked at the little phosphorescent green hands on the bedside clock. 6:43 a.m. He smiled. Only one person would consider calling him at the time in the morning. He picked up the phone and murmured in an exaggeratedly sleepy voice, "Good morning, my darling." There was no immediate response, and for a moment, Harry wondered if the hotel operator had put the call through the wrong room. He was about to replace the receiver when he heard sobbing. "Is that you, Emma?" "Yes," came the reply. "What's the matter?" he asked soothingly. "Sebastian is dead." Harry didn't reply immediately, because he now wanted to believe he was still dreaming. "How can that be possible?" he eventually said. "I spoke to him only yesterday." "He was killed this morning," said Emma, clearly able to manage a few words at a time. Harry sat bolt upright, suddenly wide awake. "In a car accident?" continued Emma between sobs. Harry tried to remain calm as he waited for her to tell him exactly what had happened. "They were traveling up to Cambridge together." "They?" repeated Harry. "Sebastian and Bruno." "Is that Bruno still alive?" "Yes, but he's in hospital in Harlow, and they are not sure if he will make it through the night." Harry threw back the blanket and placed his feet on the carpet. He was freezing and felt sick. "I'll take a taxi to the airport immediately and catch the first flight back to London." "I'm going straight to the hospital," said Emma. She didn't add anything else. And Harry wondered for a moment if the line had gone dead. Then he heard her whisper, "They need something to identify his body." Emma replaced the receiver, but it was some time before she could gather enough strength to stand up. She eventually made her way unsteadily across the room, clinging onto several pieces of furniture, like a sailor in a storm. She opened the drawing room door to find Madsen standing in the hall, his head bowed. She had never known their old retainer to show the slightest emotion in front of a member of the family, and hardly recognized the shrunken figure now clutching onto the metal piece for support. Um, just in case you're catching in, I was reading this book, Be Careful What You Wish For by Jeffrey Asher. They say it's among the #1 bestsellers, and I'm taking up myself on a challenge of reading for 7 days straight. So every night, I'll make sure I read for 30 minutes from this book. I don't know whether some of you have read it so far or... Emma replaced the receiver, but it was some time before she could gather enough strength to stand up. She eventually made her way unsteadily across the room, clinging onto several pieces of furniture, like a sailor in a room. She opened the drawing room door to find Madsen standing in the hall, his head bowed. She had never known their old retainer to show. Shit, had I read this before? Mabel has packed an overnight for you, madam, he stammered. And if you allow me, I'll drive you to the hospital. Thank you, Marsden. That's most considerate of you, Emma said as he opened the front door for her. Marsden took her arm as they made their way down the steps towards the car, the first time he had ever touched the mistress. He eventually opened the door, and she climbed in and sank into the leather upholstery as if she was an old lady. Marsden switched on the ignition, shifted the gear lever into first, and set out on the long journey from the Manor House to the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow. Emma suddenly realized she hadn't rang her brother or sister to let them know what had happened. She would call Grace and Giles this evening, when they were more likely to be alone. This was not something she wanted to share when strangers might be present, and then she felt a piercing pain in her stomach, as if she had been stabbed. Who was going to tell Jessica that... Sorry. Who was going to tell Jessica that she would never see her brother again? Would she ever be the same cheerful little girl who ran around Seb like an obedient puppy, tail wagging with embroidered adoration? Jessica must not hear the news from someone else's lips, which meant that Emma would have to return to the Manor House as quickly as possible. Marsden pulled into the forecourt of the local garage, where he usually filled up on a Friday afternoon, when the petrol pump attendant spotted Mrs. Clifton sitting in the back seat of the green Austin A30. He touched the rim of his cap. She didn't acknowledge him, and the young man wondered if he had done something wrong. He filled the tank and then lifted the bonnet to check the oil. Once he had slammed the bonnet back down, he touched the rim of his hat again, but Marsden drove off without a word, not parting without the usual sixpence. What's got into them? Murmured the young man as the car disappeared. Once they were back on the road, Emma tried to recall the exact words the Peterhouse College admissions tutor had used when he haltingly told her the news. I'm sorry to have to tell you, Miss Clifton, that your son has been killed in a motorcar accident. So sad. Motorcar accident. Beyond the stark statement, Mr. Paget seemed to know very little. Very little, but then, as he explained, he was no more than the messenger. He was no more than a messenger. Questions kept colliding in Emma's mind. Why had her son been traveling to Cambridge by car when she had bought him a train ticket only a couple of days before? Who had been driving, Sebastian or Bruno? Were they going too fast? Had a tire burst? Had another car been involved? So many questions, but she doubted if anyone knew all of the answers. A few minutes the tutor had called. The police had rung to ask if Mr. Clifton would be able to visit the hospital to identify the body. Emma explained that her husband was in New York on a book tour. She might not have agreed to take his place if she had realized that he would be back in England the following day. Thank God he was coming by plane and wouldn't have to spend 5 days crossing the Atlantic, mourning alone. As Marsden drove through unfamiliar towns, Chippenham, Newbury, Slough, Don Pedro Martinez interrupted Emma's thoughts more than once. Was it possible that he could have been seeking revenge for what had taken place in Southampton just a few weeks ago? But if the other person in the car was Martinez's son Bruno, shit, it's crazy reading English sometimes, you know. Hi Ellie, I hope you're enjoying the book. I'm reading from the book Be Careful What You Wish For by Jeffrey Archer from, and my countdown has like 17 minutes left, so I'm doing 30 minutes of book reading strictly. Emma's thoughts returned to Sebastian as Marsden left the Great West Road and turned north in the direction of the A1. The road Sebastian had been traveling on only hours before. Emma had once read that in times of personal tragedy, all anyone wanted to do was turn the clock back. She was no different. The journey passed quickly. As Sebastian was rarely out of her mind, she recalled his birth when Harry was in prison on the other side of the world. His first steps at the age of 8 months and 4 days. His first word, more. And his first day at school when he jumped out of the car even before Harry had had time to put on the brakes. Then later at Beechcroft Abbey, when the headmaster had wanted to expel him but granted Seb a reprieve when he won a scholarship to Cambridge. So much to look forward to, so much to achieve. All made history in a moment. And finally, her dreadful mistake when she had allowed the cabinet secretary to persuade her that Seb should become involved with the government's plan to bring Don Pedro Martinez to justice. If she had refused Sir Alan Redmayne's request, her only son would be alive. If. As they reached the outskirts of Harlow, Emma glanced out of the window to see a sign pointing them to the Princess Alexandra Hospital. She turned to concentrate on what would be expected of her. A few minutes later, Marsden drove through a set of right iron gates that never closed before, drawing up outside the main entrance of the hospital. Emma got out of the car and began walking towards the front door, while Marsden went in search of a parking space. She gave the young receptionist her name and The cheerful smile on the girl's face was replaced with a look of pity. Will you be kind enough to wait for a moment, Miss Clifton? She said as she picked up her phone. I'll let Mr. Owen know you're here. Mr. Owen, he was the consultant on duty when your son was admitted this morning. Emma nodded and began pacing relentlessly and down the corridor, jumbled thoughts replacing jumbled memories. Who? Why? When? She only stopped pacing when a starched, collared, smartly dressed nurse inquired, Are you Miss Clifton? Emma nodded. Please come with me. The nurse led Emma along a green-walled corridor. No words were spoken, but then, what could either of them say? They came to a halt outside the door which displayed the name Mr. William Owen, FRCS. The nurse knocked, opened the door and stood aside to allow Emma to enter. A tall, thin, balding man with an undertaker's doleful visage rose from behind his desk. Emma wondered if that face ever smiled. Good afternoon, Miss Clifton, he said, before ushering her into the only comfortable chair in the room. I'm so sorry we have to meet in such sad circumstances, he added. Emma felt sorry for the poor man. How many times a day did he have to deliver those same words? From the look of his face, it didn't get any easier. I'm afraid there is a lot of paperwork to be completed, but I fear the coroner will require a formal identification before we can think about that. Emma bowed her head and burst into tears, wishing, as Harry had suggested, that she had allowed him to carry out the unbearable task. Mr. Owen leapt up from behind the desk, crouched down beside her and said, I'm sorry, Miss Clifton. Harold Guisberg. English is supposed to be this crazy, man. Harold Guisberg couldn't have been more considerate and helpful. Harry's publisher had booked him on the first available flight to London, first class. At least he would be comfortable. Harold thought, although he didn't imagine the poor man would be able to sleep, he decided this was not the time to tell him the good news, but simply asked Harry to pass on his heartfelt condolences to Emma. We're still reading. Be careful what you wish for. And I still have about 7 minutes to go. When Harry checked out of the Pura Hotel 40 minutes later, he found Harold's chauffeur standing on the sidewalk waiting to drive him to Idlewild Airport. Harry climbed into the back of the limousine as he had no desire to speak to anyone. Instinctively, his thoughts turned to Emma and what she must be going through. He didn't like the idea of her having to identify their son's body. Perhaps the hospital staff would suggest she wait until he returned. Harry didn't give a thought to the fact that he would be among the first passengers to cross the Atlantic non-stop, as he could only think about his son and how much he had been looking forward to going up to Cambridge to begin his first year at university. And after that, he had assumed that Seb's natural gift for languages he would want to join the Foreign Office or become a translator or possibly even teach. Or after the comet had taken off, Harry rejected the glass of champagne offered by a smiling air hostess, but then How could she know that? How could she know he had nothing to smile about? He didn't explain why he wouldn't be eating or sleeping. During the war, when he was behind enemy lines, Harry had trained himself to stay awake for 36 hours only, surviving on the adrenaline of fear. He knew he wouldn't be able to sleep until he had seen his son for the first time, and he suspected, not for some, sorry, not for some considerable time after that, the adrenaline of despair. The consultant led Emma silently down a bleak corridor until they came to a halt. She halt outside of a hermetically sealed door with a single word mortuary displayed in appropriately black letters on its pebbled glass pane. Mr. Owen pushed open the door and stood aside to allow Emma to enter. The door closed behind her with a squelch. The sudden change in temperature made her shiver, and then her eyes settled on a trolley standing in the middle of the room. The faint outline of her son's body was visible under the shade. A white-coated assistant stood at the head of the trolley, but didn't speak. "Are you ready, Miss Clifton?" asked Mr. Owen gently. "Yes," said Emma firmly, her fingernails cutting into the palms of her hands. Owen nodded, and the mortician pulled back the sheet to reveal a scarred and battered face that Emma recognized immediately. She screamed, collapsed onto her knees, and began to sob uncontrollably. Mr. Owen and the mortician were not surprised by his predictable reaction of a mother at the first sight of her dead son, but they were shocked when she said quietly, "That's not Sebastian." As the taxi drew up close, Chapter 2. As the taxi drew up outside the hospital, Harry was surprised to see Emma standing by the entrance, clearly waiting for him. He was even more surprised when she ran towards him, relief etched on her face. "Seb's alive?" she shouted long before she had reached him. "But you told me," he began as she threw her arms around him. "The police made a mistake. They assumed it was the owner of the car who was driving, and that therefore Seb must have been in the passenger seat." "Then Bruno was the passenger?" said Harry quietly. "Yes, Emma. Yes," said Emma, feeling a little guilty. "You realize what that means?" said Harry, releasing her. "No, what are you getting at?" "The police must have told Martinez that his son had survived, only for him to discover later that it was Bruno who had been killed, not Sebastian." Emma bowed her head. "Poor man," she said as they entered the hospital. "Unless," said Harry, not finishing the sentence. "So how's Seb?" he asked quietly. "What state is he in?" "Pretty bad, I'm afraid. Mr. Owen told me there weren't many bones left in his body to break. It seems he will be in hospital for several months and may end up spending the rest of his life in a wheelchair." "Just be thankful he's alive," said Harry, placing an arm around his wife's shoulder. "Will they let me see him?" "Yes, but only for a few minutes. And be warned, darling, he's covered in plaster and bandages, so you might not even recognize him." Emma took his hand and led him up to the first floor, where they came across a woman dressed in a dark blue uniform who was bustling around, keeping a close eye on the patients while giving the occasional order to her staff. "I am Miss Pudikombe," she announced, thrusting out her hand. "Matron to you," whispered Emma. Harry shook her hand and said, "Good day, matron." Without another word, the diminutive figure led them through the beaven ward to find two neat rows of beds. Every one of them was occupied. Miss Petticombe sailed on until she reached a patient at the far end of the room. She drew a curtain around Sebastian Arthur Clifton and then withdrew. Harry stared down at his son. His left leg was held up by a pulley, while the other one, also encased in plaster, lay flat on the bed. His head was swathed in bandages, leaving one eye to focus on his parents, but his lips didn't move. As Harry bent down to kiss him on the forehead, the first words Sebastian uttered were, "How's Bruno?" "I'm sorry to have to question you both after all you've been through," said Chief Inspector Miles. "I wouldn't unless it was absolutely necessary." "And why is it necessary?" asked Harry, who was no stranger to detectives or their methods of extracting information. "I'm yet to be convinced that what happened on the A1 was an accident." "What are you suggesting?" asked Harry, looking directly at the detective. "I'm not suggesting anything, sir, but our backroom journeys have carried out a thorough inspection of the vehicle, and they think one or two things just don't add up." "Like what?" asked Emma. "First, Miss Clifton," said Miles, "we can't work out why your son crossed the central reservation when he so obviously risked being hit by an oncoming vehicle." "Perhaps the car had a mechanical fault," suggested Harry. "That was our first thought," replied Miles. "But although the car was badly damaged, none of the tires had burst, and the steering wheel shaft was intact, which is almost unknown to an accident of this kind." "That's hardly proof of a crime being committed," said Harry. "No, sir," said Miles, "and it's on its own. It wouldn't have been enough for me to ask the coroner to refer the case to the DPP, but a witness has come forward with some rather disturbing evidence." "What did this have to say?" "She," said Miles, referring to his notebook, "a Mrs. Still reading from Be Careful with What You Wish For by Jeffrey Archer, and I'm doing a challenge of reading for 7 days, 30 minutes straight, and I think I'm doing my last minute. Charlize told us she was overtaken by an open-top MG, which was just about to pass 3 lorries that were in convoy on the inside lane. When the first lorry moved into the outside lane, although there was no other vehicle in front of him, this meant that the driver of the MG had to brake suddenly. The third lorry then also moved across into the outside lane, again for no apparent reason, while the middle lorry maintained its speed, leaving the MG with no way to overtake or move to the safety of the inside lane. Ms. Charlize went on to say that the 3 lorries kept the MG boxed in this position for some considerable time, continued the detective, until its driver, without rhyme or reason, carried across the central reservation straight into the face of the oncoming traffic. "Have you been able to question any of the 3 lorry drivers?" asked Emma. "No, we have been unable to track down any of them, Miss Clifton." "I don't think we haven't tried, but what you're suggesting is unthinkable," said Harry. "Who would want to kill 2 innocent boys?" "I would have agreed with you, Miss Clifton. Mr. Clifton, if we hadn't recently discovered that Bruno Martinez didn't originally intend to accompany your son on the journey to Cambridge. How could you possibly know that?" "Because his girlfriend, a Miss Thornton, has come forward and informed us that she had planned to go to the cinema with Bruno that day, but she had to cancel at the last moment because she had caught a cold. The chief inspector took a pen out of his pocket and turned the page of his notebook and looked directly at Sebastian's parents before asking, "Do either of you have any reason to believe that someone might have wanted to harm your son?" "No," said Harry. "Yes," said Emma. And my time is done. Thanks to everyone who has managed to catch up the live, and if you have missed the whole reading session, you'll definitely find it here, and I guess I'll find you again tonight, same time. And we have managed to read up to the end of the second chapter, and we're starting the third one. So good night.